Sophia Carter traced the rim of her wine glass, her eyes fixed on the flickering candle in front of her. Across the table, Daniel's seat remained empty. The lasagna had cooled untouched. A glance at the clock confirmed what she already knew. He wasn't coming. She unlocked her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media. Perfect couples smiled back at her, their curated happiness stark against her own reality. Anniversaries celebrated. Spontaneous date nights shared, reminders of what she once had. A notification from Daniel appeared. Caught up at work. Don't wait up. No apology. No regret. Sophia exhaled, setting the phone aside. It wasn't anger she felt anymore. That had burned out long ago. What remained was something colder. Acceptance. This was her life now, a house filled with beautiful things, but absent of warmth. A husband who provided everything except himself. She pushed back her chair and wandered into the living room, her fingers trailing along the leather armrest of the couch. The room was immaculate, designed to impress. Yet it felt more like a showroom than a home. She sank into the cushions, tucking her legs beneath her, and stared at the wedding photo on the mantel. There they were, her and Daniel, frozen in time. She had been radiant that day, full of hope. Blissfully unaware of how love could fade, not in a sudden, dramatic rupture, but in the quiet erosion of neglect. Her thoughts drifted to the past, to the man Daniel used to be in their early years. He had been attentive, affectionate. He used to pull her into his arms for no reason at all. Used to kiss her in the middle of a sentence just because he couldn't wait. Now, the most intimacy they shared was a polite peck on the cheek before he left for work. The loneliness had settled into her bones, making itself a permanent resident. She had tried everything. Dressing up, planning weekends away, initiating conversation. But nothing penetrated the fortress he had built around himself. Her phone buzzed again. This time a message from her best friend. Claire, you're not doing this again. Get out of the house. Come to the gym with me tomorrow. Sophia stared at the message, hesitating. The gym. It wasn't that she was out of shape, but she had never been the type to enjoy sweating in front of strangers. Still, the idea of doing something, anything, to break the monotony was tempting. Before she could overthink it, she typed back, fine, but I'm not promising enthusiasm. The next morning, Sophia stood in front of the full-length mirror in the gym's changing room, adjusting her leggings. Claire had already abandoned her for a spin class, leaving her alone with the daunting reality of weight racks and treadmills. She exhaled, tightening her ponytail, and stepped out onto the floor. The space was filled with the steady rhythm of feet pounding against machines, the clinking of dumbbells, and the hum of low conversations. That was when she saw him. Liam Brooks stood near the weight section, speaking with a client. Even from a distance, there was something effortlessly magnetic about him. He was younger, mid to late 20s at most. His lean, athletic frame moved with an ease that suggested confidence rather than arrogance. Tousled dark hair, sharp jawline, and a smile that held just enough mischief to be dangerous. Sophia looked away, scolding herself for noticing. She was here for herself, not for distractions. She had just reached for a pair of weights when a voice interrupted her thoughts. You look a little lost. She turned to find Liam watching her, arms crossed over his broad chest. Up close, his features were even more striking, his eyes holding an amused glint. I'm not lost, she said, lifting the weights as if to prove a point. His gaze flickered to her hands. You might want to start lighter. Don't want to hurt yourself on your first day. Sophia narrowed her eyes. I think I can handle it. He grinned. All right, but if you change your mind, I'm Liam, I train here. She nodded but didn't respond. Instead, she turned her focus to the exercise, determined not to let him, or anything else, distract her. Yet as she moved through her routine, she felt his presence, not in an intrusive way, but in a way that made her hyper-aware of herself, the way her tank top clung to her skin. The heat creeping up her neck whenever she caught his glance. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her like that, like she was something worth noticing. By the time she finished, Claire was waiting near the exit. So not as bad as you thought, right? Sophia grabbed her water bottle, glancing back. Once, Liam was already occupied with another client, but for a fleeting moment, his gaze met hers. She turned back to Claire, forcing a casual shrug. Yeah, not as bad, but as they walked out, she couldn't ignore the way her pulse had quickened, or the way, for the first time in years, she felt awake. Sophia hadn't expected to return to the gem so soon, yet here she was, slipping through the glass doors for the third time that week. She told herself it was about routine, about reclaiming a sense of purpose, but she couldn't ignore the subtle thrill that accompanied each visit, the silent, unspoken anticipation of seeing him. Liam Brooks. She scanned the room, pretending to stretch as her gaze swept over the familiar faces. Then there he was, adjusting the weight plates for another client. His presence had a gravitational pull she couldn't explain, a quiet confidence that made everything else in the gym blur into the background. You're getting the hang of this, Claire noted beside her. Pulling her into the present, Sophia forced a smile. Guess so. Claire arched an eyebrow. And you're definitely getting a lot more attentive service than I did my first week here. Heat rushed to Sophia's cheeks. That's not relax, Claire said with a knowing smirk. A little harmless admiration never hurt anyone, but that was the problem. It wasn't harmless, it was something else, something Sophia refused to name. She made her way to the treadmill, increasing the speed gradually. The rhythmic pounding of her feet should have been enough to clear her mind, but her thoughts kept drifting. What was it about Liam that unsettled her so much? It wasn't just his looks, though those certainly didn't help. It was the way he seemed to see her, not as someone's wife, not as a woman past her prime, but as something still vibrant. A shadow fell across her treadmill. You're pushing yourself harder today, she startled, gripping the rails as she slowed her pace. Liam stood beside her, arms folded, a lopsided grin on his lips. Sophia inhaled, forcing steadiness into her voice. Figured I should actually try, since I'm here. Good, he said, eyes flicking over the screen, but you're tensing your shoulders too much. Before she could react, he stepped closer, placing a hand between her shoulder blades. His touch was light, instructive, but it sent a pulse of heat down her spine. Relax here, he murmured. Let the movement flow naturally. She obeyed, though her breath hitched slightly at his proximity. Better, he said, withdrawing his hand. The absence of his touch was almost worse than the contact itself. I have a client in 5, but if you're interested, I can show you a few form corrections after. Sophia hesitated, caught between reason and impulse. But before she could answer, Claire called out from across the room, waving her over. Liam took a step back. Think about it. And with that, he was gone. The offer lingered in her mind long after she left the gym. She told herself she wouldn't stay late, wouldn't find an excuse to take him up on it. But the next evening, as she finished her usual workout, she saw him standing by the training mats, waiting. She could still walk out, pretend she hadn't seen him. Instead, she walked toward him. Liam nodded approvingly. You came. I had some extra time, she said, as if that explained anything. He gestured for her to stand in front of him. All right, let's work on posture. The lesson was innocent. At least it should have been. But every moment stretched too long. Every correction was an excuse for his hands to brush against her. A guiding press on her hip, a firm touch on her lower back. The way his voice dipped slightly whenever he spoke directly into her ear, each time. Her pulse betrayed her. They worked in silence for a while, the room emptying as the evening wore on. You're a fast learner, Liam said, stepping back finally. Sophia exhaled, relieved and disappointed at once. You're a good teacher. His eyes flickered with something unreadable. You know, I don't usually do one-on-one sessions like this, she swallowed. Then why? Because I wanted to. The air between them shifted. It wasn't a confession, not exactly, but it wasn't nothing either. Sophia's mouth went dry. She should say something firm, final, dismissive, but all she managed was a quiet, "Liam." He held her gaze for a second too long, then smiled as if shaking something off. "That's enough for today." The spell broke. Sophia nodded quickly, grabbing her water bottle. Her heart hammering against her ribs, she turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "I'll see you tomorrow." 1,000 responses wore to her mind, but she only gave him a small, uncertain nod before slipping out the door. She told herself she wouldn't come back, but deep down she already knew she would. Sophia knew she was playing with fire. Yet as she stood in front of the gym's full-length mirror, adjusting the straps of her top, she couldn't ignore the way anticipation curled in her stomach. It was reckless, foolish even, but she had stopped lying to herself. She wanted to see Liam again. She arrived earlier than usual, scanning the room under the guise of stretching. When she finally spotted him, he was leaning against the squat rack, arms crossed, a quiet smirk playing at his lips. He had seen her first. "You're early," he said, closing the distance between them. She shrugged, feigning indifference. "Figured I'd get some extra practice in?" His gaze flickered over her, appraising. "You don't need it. You're already moving like someone who knows exactly what they're doing." The weight of his words settled in the space between them, heavier than they should have been. "Let's start," she said, ignoring the way her pulse had begun to race. The session was supposed to be simple, form corrections, technique refinement. But from the moment his hands settled on her, something shifted. "Bend your knees a little more," he murmured, his breath grazing her ear as he guided her into position. Her body obeyed before her mind caught up. His hands lingered a second longer than necessary, and when she turned her head slightly, their faces were closer than they should have been. Her breath hitched. Liam didn't step back. The silence stretched, thick with something unspeakable. His hand brushed over hers, a touch so light it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. They both knew it wasn't. She should move, she should say something, anything, to shatter the moment before it became irreversible. But then his fingers curled gently around her wrist, holding her there. "Sophia." It was the first time he had said her name like that, low, careful, intimate. She swallowed hard. "This is a bad idea." His thumb grazed the inside of her wrist, tracing slow, deliberate circles. "Then why haven't you pulled away?" The truth settled like a weight in her chest. She didn't want to. For so long, she had been invisible, a wife in name only, a woman whose existence had become an afterthought in her own home. But here, in this moment, she wasn't just seen, she was wanted. A voice in her head screamed at her to leave, to remember Daniel, their vows, the life they had built. But all she could focus on was the warmth of Liam's skin against hers. The way her body ached to close the distance between them. He shifted closer. If she leaned in just an inch, just a fraction, the door to the weight room creaked open. Sophia jerked back, her pulse hammering as another gym member strolled in. Oblivious to the moment they had interrupted, Liam exhaled, sharply, raking a hand through his hair. "We should stop," she nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "Yes. But as she turned to leave, he caught her wrist once more. "Meet me tomorrow, after hours." Her breath stilled. This was the moment, the final chance to walk away before the line was crossed. But as she met his gaze, she already knew her answer. "Okay." She left without looking back, but her heart was already racing toward tomorrow.